Good morning, everyone. For another hour of questions and answers. Couple of things as usual to tell you. The President is at Shogang this morning at Big Air Women's Freestyle event, and this afternoon, early evening, he's at curling, which is, I think, the mixed bronze medal event of which I have some interest. And just to give you a few TV figures as usual, which are quite interesting from around the world. Timo will be here a week. Timo Lume, who's the chief executive of television and marketing for the IOC, will be here a week tomorrow when we have a more consolidated view. But just a few things just to give you an idea of the coverage around the world. The coverage of the ski jumping men's normal hill competition on ZDF achieved the highest share of viewing of the day across all programming in Germany. The opening ceremony in Sweden on Channel 5 achieved an audience over double that of Tokyo opening ceremony. It aired at the same time on the same channel, so that's an interesting like-for-like comparison. And in the US, NBC is reporting that they've now reached 1 billion minutes of Beijing content that have been streamed by viewers on their digital platform. That's the fastest time that they've got to that milestone. 1 billion minutes of viewing. Okay, so today, as promised, as usual, we'll discuss any topic you want, but I have Dr. Brian McCluskey, who you will know is the chair of the Beijing 2022 Medical Expert Panel, and then we have some other guests online, so I will hand over to my colleague Yang Jirong, who will explain to you, and then we'll have some presentations.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to host today's daily briefing together with Mark again. And joining us online, we also have whom you all know very well, Deputy Director General of the Office of Pandemic Prevention and Control of Beijing 2022, Mr. Huang Chun, who will brief us on the latest information of the countermeasures. And before that, I will brief you on other information. First of all, competitions. Yesterday, 14 events were held in 11 competition venues, yielding 9 gold medals, won by China, ROC, Canada, Switzerland, Sweden, the Netherlands, Germany, Italy, and Slovenia. And the newly included event at the Beijing Games, the ski jumping mixed team, was held at the National Ski Jumping Center, Snow Ruyi, last night. And the Slovenia team won the champion, becoming the first Olympic champion for this event. And the alpine ski men's downhill that was postponed due to weather reasons was held yesterday, and the Swiss athlete won the gold. Here, we express our warmest congratulations to all the athletes who are competing really hard. And yesterday, we are also very happy to see that young athletes of China have also made progress in winter sports. The 17-year-old Su Yiming won the first Olympic medal at the Winter Games for men's snowboard. What I want to say is that no matter whether it's Chinese young athletes and or young athletes from other countries, whether they won medals or not, compared to their results, the spirit that we saw from them is more inspiring. And one of the visions of the Beijing Games is to let the Olympics light up the dream of the youth. So we look forward to having more young people to compete on the field of play of the Winter Games, and we also hope that the Beijing Games will drive more young people to engage in winter sports. Today, 12 events will be held in 11 competition venues with 10 gold medals, 3 in Beijing, 2 in Yanqing, and 5 in Zhangjiakou. Finally, let's look at the weather again. During the day and into the night today, weather in all competition zones will be mainly clear to cloudy, and the temperatures continue to rise. The maximum temperature in Beijing is 7 degrees Celsius, and the minimum is -4. Yanqing will have 3 to 8 meters per second northwest wind at the top of the mountain during the day, with gusts of 7 to 13 meters per second, and mainly sunny to cloudy in Zhangjiakou. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Okay, as I said, we're going to have a focus a little bit today on COVID and control measures. So let's go over to Mr. Huang, Deputy Director General of the Office of Pandemic Prevention and Control, to run through some of the figures for us. Mr. Huang.
Thank you, Mark. Dear friends, good morning. I will now brief you on the latest information of the COVID-19 countermeasures. Between midnight to 23:59 on February the 7th, the inbound participants at the airport was 133, including 93 athletes and team officials and 40 other stakeholders. 0 positive case tested at the customs. During the same period, the total number of PCR tests within the closed loop was 70,524, including 6,720 athletes and team officials and 63,804 other stakeholders. 6 positive cases after confirmatory tests, including 5 athletes and team officials and 1 other stakeholder. And between January 23rd, the pre-opening of the village, to February the 7th, a total number of 393 positive cases were discovered, and among them, 40.46% was athletes and 95.54% was other stakeholders. And so far, almost all positive cases were infected before their arrival in China or during the incubation period inside the closed loop. And according to our statistics, about 2/3 of the population, or 68%, have been recovered. And also inside the closed loop, there's no concentrated cases, showing that the current countermeasures are effective and the overall risk is under control. And with the decrease in the number of the inbound participants, the proportion of positive cases at the airport will also decrease. And in the next period, because of the possibility of infection within the incubation period, the number of or the proportion of positive cases tested inside the closed loop may increase. But with the continue of the countermeasures, we expect that the number of cases will continue to drop. And in the next stage, we will continue to strictly follow the countermeasures inside the closed loop to create a safe and healthy environment for the games. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Huang. Let's now go to Dr. Brian McCluskey, who will give us a view of kind of where we are after how many days of competition, 4 or 5 is it now? I'm losing track. But Brian, over to you.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, everyone. Just a quick comment really on where we are in terms of the planning and what we expected to happen during the Games. And you remember when we started this process, we said we were putting in place 3 layers of testing to make sure the Games were safe, pre-departure, airport, and inside the closed loop, and that we expected the positivity rate to be higher at pre-departure, lower at the airport, and lower still in the closed loop, and that the positivity in the closed loop would decline after people had been here for 3 to 5 days. And that is what we are now seeing. The number of cases inside the closed loop is going down, and the number of cases at the airport was 0 at the moment. So we're seeing it evolve as we expected it to do, and we now still believe that the situation inside the closed loop is extremely safe, and there's no sign of spread of infection, and certainly no sign of infection spreading outside the closed loop. So that is generally good news that we are where we expect it to be. It doesn't mean we can relax, because we never relax about coronavirus, but we can say we are comfortable with where we are, and we hope that continues, and we expect it to continue. The other point we're at is that we're now seeing more people coming out of isolation than are going into isolation, and again, that is good news. The average length of stay in isolation is now just under 7 days. And we know that people who had previous infections can be let out earlier because they are no longer infectious. And we see that people with previous infection are now coming out of isolation in just over 4 days, and about 8 days for new infections who are potentially more risky. So again, that is moving in the right direction. I say again, that doesn't mean we can relax, but it means that we are comfortable with where we are at currently. Thank you.
Dr. McCloskey, thank you very much indeed. Okay, let's take some questions now. Happy to go to questions. Yeah, let's start over here. The lady with the black hat.
Hi, Jacqueline Diaz with National Public Radio. In the case of the Belgian bobsledder, I believe, she says she had COVID before coming and had recovered. But she said that the test would still show that she is still positive for COVID even after multiple tests show she's negative. Has there been any leeway given to athletes that have had COVID and may test positive while they're here after initially testing negative? And in that case, do organizers really think it's fair then to disqualify these athletes if they can't recover in time for their competition? Thank you.
Thanks very much. I think it's...
Sorry.
You'll understand that we need to be very careful talking about individual cases, but I think in terms of the principle about leniency and so on, Brian, I can leave that to you very clearly.
Thank you. Essentially, there are two situations that can arise where people have had coronavirus before and then test positive when they get here. One of those we know about is that people can continue to test positive intermittently for quite a long time after having a diagnosis of COVID. I think the record in the medical literature is about 109 days. Mostly those people are not infectious and can be allowed to continue to partake in the games and compete. But the second position is where somebody has had COVID before and then has a reinfection with a new variant like Omicron. That's an entirely new infection, and they are infectious and can't be allowed into the closed loop without restrictions. So the challenge is to distinguish the two. And the medical expert panel has developed protocols to allow us to do that. And that looks at all the range of values of the test that individuals have had over the period from before the games to now, to form a judgment about whether we think this is a case where they're continuing to shed parts of the virus but are not infectious. And in that case, they can be allowed out under the close contact protocol. They will be allowed to train and compete. So the medical expert panel can make the distinction, but those who are testing positive because of their previous infection will be allowed to take part in the games and will not be disqualified from doing so.
Thank you very much, chap. Lady down the front here.
Good morning, Vanessa Lee with CTV Canadian News. Finland's team doctor is saying that isolation decisions are not based on science, but rather cultural and political decisions. How do you respond to that?
They're based on science, and they have been since many months before these games started. The medical expert panel has been meeting regularly. We have been sharing and exchanging scientific papers between us. We've been looking at the evidence as it emerges from around the world and applying that to the protocols we've developed here. Our understanding of coronavirus has been changing constantly over the last 2 years. It continues to evolve, and as it evolves, we review the situation in terms of our protocols. But they are based on science. The difference, I say, is the difference between those people who test positive because they're continuing to shed the virus and the fact that we are now seeing people testing positive who are reinfections. That was not something that was known about even 2 months ago until Omicron came around. So the possibility that somebody is a new infection and is therefore infectious has been developed over the last 2 months, and our protocols allow for that, but that is still based on the science around the world about reinfections.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, let's take the lady here. Yeah.
Good morning. Yan Mei with China Global Television Network. Unlike the 2008 Olympics this year, due to the pandemic, foreign reporters are unable to tour around China and experience the culture in other cities. So what exactly is the Beijing Olympic Committee doing to ensure, our reporters getting the experience and the culture experience as well? Thank you.
Thanks very much. I think that's one for you, Madame Yang.
Thank you very much for your question. What I can say is that our friends from the media, because of the COVID, we have to stay within the closed loop. It's true for everybody. Without safety, there wouldn't be a successul or splendid games. We have taken all the measures to guarantee the participation of the competition of the athletes, to provide the athletes a safe environment without additional concerns and worries, and so that they can compete at their best and reach the best performance. Under the pandemic, the coverage from the media is particularly important. A lot of the foreign journalists have traveled far to Beijing to cover this game. I think this is a reflection of the support to the Olympic movement and our love towards sports games. We really appreciate that. Beijing 2022 Organizing Committee, we are committed to provide the best support to the coverage of the games for all the journalists and friends from media. Yes, it is true that a lot of the foreign journalists were thinking about to tour around, which is impossible. However, at the moment, it is such a pity. Beijing Organizing Committee and we are working together with the press center outside the loop, and we are organizing some online sightseeing and interviewing programs. It is a bilingual program. We would like to thank the new era for providing us with these new technologies to make this online broadcasting possible. Journalists within the closed loop, if you want to participate in the program, and you can have some sightseeing online virtually, and there can be some virtual interactions. What I can recommend here, on the morning of February the 11th, this series of online sightseeing and interviewing program will have a featured program to the panda protection base in Chengdu, and so you will see the original prototype of Bingdundun, the giant panda. So you are welcome to join us on that featured program. After that, we'll have a series of featured programs on different themes. So that's an online sightseeing program. Offline, within the closed loop, some of the journalists have already joined us in the program of visiting the Great Wall. You have experienced the splendid Great Wall. We plan to organize more of such programs, so please make sure that you follow the information on my info so that you can join these programs. Dear friends from the media, we are always ready to listen to your voices and suggestions and recommendations, and continuously improve the service we can provide to the press. We hope that by joining our hands together, we can provide to the whole world a streamlined, safe, and splendid Olympic game. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Carlos from Reuters.
Carlos Goma from Reuters. A question for Mr. Huang. on the cases and the development in the closed loop from now on. You've had 0 cases at the airport, the ones you announced today, 6 cases in the closed loop. How do you see that number in the closed loop developing in the next few days? And a question for Mark, has there been any contact of the South Korean Olympic Committee regarding yesterday's incident or disqualification at the speed skating? Thank you.
Mr. Hang, and then maybe Dr. McCluskey as well, but Mr. Hang first, yeah.
Yes, as we have less inbound arrivals, the positive cases at the customs is dropping. The COVID virus and Omicron may be tested negative at the customs, but it may be still in the incubation period. So we expected that the test within the closed loop is still likely to increase. We still hope that we can follow the countermeasures strictly so that we can identify the positive cases at the first instance, and we can generally say that the countermeasures are effective within the loop and we are safe within the loop. Thank you for your question.
Dr. McCluskey, do you want to add to that?
Just to say, Mr. Huang is right in the sense that the risk is greater for people outside China than inside China, and the layers of testing we did were designed to gradually remove that until people got inside the closed loop. But people can incubate COVID slowly and test positive shortly after they arrive. But once you've been inside the closed loop for about 5 days or so, the risk that you're incubating disease from before is much less. And the reality of the closed loop and the precautions is that as you go around the village or the closed loop, essentially everybody you meet has tested negative for COVID on a PCR test within the last 24 hours. And almost all of them have been vaccinated. So your risk of developing COVID after that time becomes less and less. So we may see some more positive tests coming through, but we would expect that number to be less, and that's what we plan to happen.
So would it be fair to say that we are probably in the safest place in the world at the moment as regards catching COVID?
Yeah, I mean, I think your chance of picking up COVID within a closed loop here is less than anywhere else in the world at the moment.
Thank you, Brian. And on other question, Carlos, yeah, I mean, as you know, it's a field of play issue. It's an issue between the IF and the NOC. I think you asked if we'd been in contact. I don't know. I don't think so. We obviously talk to federations and NOCs all the time, but there's been no formal communication as far as I'm aware. Yes, gentleman at the back there.
Good morning, everybody. Philip Barker from Inside the Games. Hello, Mark.
Oh, I didn't recognise you with the mask.
There I am. Just a couple of questions about COVID. First of all, how satisfied are you that athletes are getting sufficient notice when they're cleared to allow them to prepare properly for competition? And also, I wondered whether you had any comment about the Russian team wearing masks under their masks yesterday. It seemed a little bit unusual when we saw it on the television. So if I could ask your thoughts on that, please.
In relation to the preparation time, yes, in general we are. And the system was designed to try and ensure that the testing process did not interfere with athletes' preparation for competition or their sleep or other things. Unfortunately, this is a very big, complicated system, and occasionally it goes slightly wrong. And we know there have been instances where it hasn't gone as well as it should have done. But in general, people have an ability to get tested at a time of their choosing that suits their preparation for competition. In terms of mask wearing, the wearing of masks for COVID is a personal choice by an individual, here as it is in countries all around the world. So people may choose to wear them if it makes them feel more comfortable. I would say that the medical evidence about the risk of infection on the field of play is such that masks are not necessary and probably will not help. But wearing them, I say, is an individual choice.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, gentleman in the grey sweatshirt over there. Yeah. Yes, you, sir.
I'm from Kyoto News. My question goes to Mr. Juan Bokog, and I ask in Japanese.
Well, and I have a question to Mr. Fanchu from Organization Committee. I have a question about infection rules with regards to infection to spectators. Some inspectors are screaming and talking loudly. Is that acceptable according to your protocol? Can you talk a little more about the spectators rules at the venues? For athletes, for the stakeholders, playbook specifically mentioned you're not supposed to scream, you should clap your hand. So athletes or the stakeholders are not supposed to scream, but the spectators are completely allowed to scream?
Is that a question for you, Brian, or yeah? Dr. Huang, yeah, sorry.
Thank you very much for your question. That is an issue of concern for everybody. The difference between Beijing Olympics and Tokyo Olympics is whether there is spectators or not. Even though we are not seeing 100% of the viewers in some of the venues, however, we still see a lot of the spectators in some of the venues, and in the coming days we may encourage more spectators to get into the venues to watch the games. Overall, the COVID situation is under control, so the spectators are being organized to get into the venues. Before the competition, we'll have health monitoring on these spectators, and they also need to do the PCR screening test. Some of the spectators come from outside the loop. They have designated entrance and exits, and they have particular pathways, and they are sitting at the designated areas in the venue. And when they return back to their home or to wherever they are staying, we'll have a 1-week health monitoring for those spectators with 2 times of PCR to make sure that these spectators, when they come outside the loop, and they should be safe and they are not infected. This is also to ensure that the whole city stays safe. Thank you very much for your question.
Thanks very much. Yeah. Graham, did you want to ask a question? Yeah. Sorry, Graham Dunbar from AP.
Hi. Thank you, Mark. I just want to ask a question about China's biggest long-term contribution to the Olympic Games, which is the Alibaba sponsorship deal, which is already transforming delivery of the Games for broadcasters and is going to for local organizing committees, including in Paris and Los Angeles. Maybe no sponsor has been more individually, personally linked to the IOC president than Jack Ma, who got almost like royal visit treatment in Lausanne 3 years ago. But the names Alibaba and Jack Ma have almost been non-existent in this room so far. Is there a reason for that? Has he been invited? Is Alibaba going to be sort of praised at some point for all that it's doing? And can we expect to see him at the Games at some point, or has he already been?
I think I might be right in saying he's no longer the CEO of Alibaba, but I'm not sure. Timo Lume will be here on Wednesday. You can ask him directly. Absolutely no problem at all. And we did a little crossover with Alibaba a couple of days ago. I'm kind of not quite sure what the implication you're trying to draw. But
well, he's not CEO anymore. That's Daniel Zhang. But yeah. No one person has probably done more to push forward the delivery of the Olympic Games in recent years than him.
Okay. Well, yeah, thanks to him and his contribution. I join you in that. Yeah, next question. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm from China News Agency. My question is to Mr. Huang Chun. We noticed that inside the closed loop, the number of positive cases is dropping, but not long ago, some people were also isolated. So where are for those people who are isolated, and what are their living conditions, and what kind of help or care did they receive? Thank you for your question. Actually, in the playbook, it's provided very clearly that for asymptomatic people, they will be staying in the isolation facilities, and for symptomatic cases, they will have to be transferred for treatment and isolation at designated hospitals. Now in Beijing and Yanqing, we have 4 isolation facilities, 1 designated hospital in Zhangjiakou, 2 isolation facilities, and 1 designated hospitals. And yes, indeed, some of the athletes and other stakeholders are now in either isolation facilities or hospital or medical institution. So some of the people who are now in the isolation facilities are because they have been infected, unfortunately, and are unable to either train at the training facility or work at their workplace. So they did have some complaint, and we responded to their concern timely. And every day between 2 to 3 o'clock, together with Pierre from IOC, we will have a coordination meeting. And also for all the hotels, isolation facilities, and medical institutions, they all join us online at the meeting so as to rectify any problems and also make improvements on the environment of those facilities. And from the feedbacks we received so far, things have been improved remarkably, but we cannot feel complacent and will make continuous improvement. And also in those facilities, we have tried to provide better services, including in terms of food, which is delivered from the villages, and also in terms of a cleaning service and the requests by the athletes for training. We have opened up better channels for us to deliver those materials to them, and I'm sure in the future we'll do even a better job. And of course, we wish them all a speedy recovery so that they can return to the FOP as soon as possible. Thank you for your question.
Dr. McCluskey, do you want to add to that?
Yes, thanks, Mark. Isolation is not good for anybody, and we know around the world that the isolation that's been caused by COVID may turn out to be one of the long-lasting damages that COVID has caused to people around the world. I took part in a call on Sunday arranged by the Athletes Commission with athletes who are in isolation. And I understand the frustration, the stress, the disappointment that they feel after all the preparations. And it is not a good place to be. But we are trying to improve that for them. And that's why we developed the protocols to allow as many people out of isolation as possible. The reality, however, is I can't make the pandemic go away for the duration of the Games. The pandemic is real and the risk is real. So we have to manage the risk. So we have protocols. We will allow as many people as possible out of isolation to train and compete as we can, but only as many as we can do safely and not put other athletes, other participants or the Chinese population at risk. In the meantime, we will do our best to look after those who are in isolation, but we have to be sure we manage that risk properly.
Thank you very much, Dr. McCluskey. Yes, gentlemen there. And Graham, I should say there is a story on, I was mentioning the crossover with Alibaba. It's on the website. We put it on yesterday, so it's on the website of the IOC. So if you want some more information on the contribution that Alibaba is making, it's front and center on the website if you want to do a story. Yes.
Good morning, Anthony Germain with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. I think my question is for Dr. Huang, and I wouldn't mind hearing Dr. McCluskey on this. I think a lot of people are very happy to see the fans, some Chinese people in the venues enjoying the games, which is quite different from what we saw in Tokyo. I just want to make sure that I understood what Mr. Huang said before. So who are these fans? How do you choose them? How do you screen them? And did I understand correctly that once they leave a sport and leave the loop, that they stay away for 7 days? Because that would mean every day you have a new batch of fans that you're bringing inside the loop. I find this very fascinating just from a logistical point of view. And Dr. McCloskey, I wonder if this raises any concerns or cautions about moving so many people in and out of a closed loop. Thank you.
Dr. Huang, I think for you first.
好的，谢谢您的对这个问题的持续的关注。事实上呢，我们的观众不是说永远是这批观众，我们每一批都有不同的观众，新的观众。
Thank you for your question. Actually, our spectators are not the same group of spectators because we have different spectators who are interested in different events. We don't have a fixed group of spectators watching all games. Second, health monitoring does not mean that they cannot leave their home. They are free to go to work, to move, and the main purpose is to let them try to stay away from large groups of people or concentration of people, and also to have 2 tests regularly in order to ensure the safety of the venues during the games time. If they want to watch the games, watch the competitions, that is our rationale. Thank you for your question.
I think you have a question already, so let's go for someone else. Anyone else want to? Oh, yes, sorry, Brian, yeah, please, sorry. I do apologise.
No, I mean, if you ask me in public health terms, what is the absolute safest way to run a sport without causing risk of COVID, the answer is you put the smallest possible number of people on the field to play and you lock the doors around them and don't let anybody else in. But that's not sport, and it's certainly not the Olympics. So the issue becomes, how can we do it that creates the right atmosphere but keeps the risk as small as possible? And that's what we're doing within the closed loop, and that's why we're working with the Chinese authorities to make sure we manage people in and out of the closed loop. We need to remember that the risk of COVID in China is extremely low. So the spectators come in are relatively low-risk people. So that can be managed by careful planning, which is what is happening with the spectators. So it's creating a minimum risk while allowing the best atmosphere we can.
Thank you, Doctor. Sorry to have cut you off there. Yep, gentleman there in the middle.
Hi, it's Kim Helmgaard from USA Today. There's a German athlete who's disqualified for the mixed team ski jump event last night because of an issue related to kind of body weight, suits and skis, that ratio. The athlete appears to accept that she may have lost some weight in quarantine. But can you address how issues, field of play issues related to athletes being in quarantine that apparently affect their event are being monitored, addressed?
I mean, obviously we can't, I don't even know that case, so it would be difficult to talk about that. But I mean, I think Dr. McCloskey just talked eloquently about how it's difficult for the athletes in confinement, and having the meeting with them 2 days ago, was it, where we heard their concerns and we understand their concerns, but I'm not sure we can add very much more to that. But we can take it offline afterwards if you want. Inside the games, over there.
Hi, Michael Pavitt from Inside the Games. A question for Dr. McCloskey. You mentioned the number of athletes in isolation has dropped. Can you tell us how many at the moment there are in isolation? And secondly, on athletes where they're testing maybe positive and negative and then positive again, at what point can they go from being considered a close contact case and being on the field of play to what's the threshold for them to be withdrawn from a competition?
In terms of number, I think there are currently 32 athletes in isolation, 50 athletes have been discharged from isolation, so more leaving than going in. In one sense, to your second question, there is no absolute figure which says if you're above this figure, you're okay. If you're below it, you're not. We have protocols for what the CT value in the test might be, but the reality is we look at the pattern of tests over a period of days or weeks to see, are we convinced that this is a case that people are doing this intermittent positive testing, they're shedding dead particles of virus, they don't have live virus in the system and therefore not infectious, so they can move into the close contact protocol. The red flags that might suggest people could not do that would be if the CT value starts falling quite dramatically, which might suggest they had acquired a new infection or becoming infectious again. So there's no fixed values, but what we look for is indications that our assumption that they're not infectious might be changing. If they become infectious, then they will not be allowed to compete.
Thank you. I'm sensing there's less intensity today, so we'll take maybe one more question. Two more questions, yeah. Steve, do you want to go first? Or yeah.
Hi, Steve Wade from Associated Press. I want to follow up with Mr. Wong and maybe Ms. John too. Who are the fans that are in these venues? You haven't sold any tickets, so I'm curious about who they are, how you select them, who gets to go in and who doesn't get to go in, why are certain people picked and other people not picked? Thanks.
Thank you for your question. Like one of the other journalists said, a good side of Beijing Games is that we have spectators on the FOP. And also, like Dr. Brian said, currently the COVID-19 pandemic is still going on globally. So for Beijing 2022 Organizing Committee, in order to create a good competing environment and atmosphere, we did overcome a lot of difficulties to organize spectators to watch the games on site. In the process of doing that, we have always put the pandemic control and prevention in the first place to consider the needs of all parties, and all the spectators have voluntarily applied for such opportunities. And also, like Mr. Huang said, before, during, and after watching the competition, they need to follow the countermeasures. And the different venues have different situations, so the number of spectators will also vary according to the size and other conditions of different venues. But in general, you can believe that the domestic spectators will cheer on for the athletes of all over the world. Thank you. And I also said earlier that the needs of all sides are considered, and we also try to have a wide scope of spectators. And the application is based on a voluntary basis. Thank you.
Okay, so it's a voluntary application, I guess. Fine. If you want more detail, I'm sure we can sort some out afterwards or later in the day. Okay, I'm sensing, yeah, let's finish then today with lady there for a last question.
Hello, Yamei from CGTN. You said earlier that the athletes are under treatment at specific facilities. I was wondering, what are the conditions, under what circumstances are they being discharged to get back to the Olympic Games? Thank you.
McCluskey, yeah, please.
First of all, I'd say I wouldn't use the word treatment, because actually the vast majority of the people who are positive are perfectly well. They have no symptoms. They're not under any treatment. So the decision about when they leave is about when we can judge that they are not infectious to other people and they don't pose a risk to athletes, participants and the population. So that's done on the basis of a series of negative tests while they're in isolation. If they get those negative tests, then they're allowed out.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we'll call that a day. Yeah, thank you. And we'll be back at 11 o'clock tomorrow. Look forward to seeing you immensely then. Thank you.